So is it the gear or is it user error? This is a really interesting question that I have pop into my mind on a regular basis. So I've been doing this YouTube thing for a number of years now, and really the central topic of a lot of my videos is getting great tones out of our Helix, Line 6 Helix, other modelers, some material based around, getting good tones out of real guitar amps. And I always find in the discussions that ensue and the questions that I get and the comments that I get, there's oftentimes a lot of interesting contradiction in user experiences when using various types of equipment. Take the Line 6 Helix, for instance. You will have some folks that sing its praises, say it can just do no wrong, it sounds amazing all the time. I kind of fall more into that camp with a couple little exceptions. Some folks say, no, forget it. All modelers are garbage. Tube amps are the way to go. It has to sound like the amp in the room. I've heard things such as, oh, that's all fine and dandy when you're doing a YouTube test, but wait till you get it live playing with a band with other guitarists. Then modelers are just useless. They just don't work. So the funny thing is a lot of the strong opinions that are given are never really backed up with anything other than anecdotal evidence, we'll call it. I played a tube amp on stage, then I played a modeler on stage. Modeler sounded terrible, tube amps sounded great. Therefore, tube amps are better. Well, there's a lot of problems with this kind of deduction. As I've mentioned in a lot of my videos, when you're trying to compare things, you have to do it as scientifically as possible, in the same scenario, at the same volume, dialed in somewhere close to being the same. Is it possible to make a modeler sound really bad? Well, absolutely it is. And it's actually quite easy to do if you don't know what you're doing. But I will go on the other hand and say, it's also very easy to make a tube amp sound bad and not work in a certain situation if you don't know what you're doing. So I think each situation has the ability to sound amazing and has the ability to sound really bad. So you might think, well, what's the point of talking about this? Well, I think it is important because a lot of folks come to conclusions about what might be, so-called better in certain situations, not really based off of anything concrete. It might be one simple experience. It might be an experience where, you plugged into a modeler and didn't really know how to tweak it or had the sound just not working really well in the first place. You compare that to a tube amp and you're so happy with it. And therefore you create this opinion that, there you go, it's settled. Modelers are terrible, right? So it's an interesting thing. And here's the funny thing too. I've put a lot of presets up on Custom Tone. I have presets up on Marketplace. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of happy customers on Marketplace and well into the hundreds of thousands of downloads on Custom Tone for my presets. The vast majority of people come back and say, oh, I love that tone. That worked really good for this. That worked really good for that. Some tones aren't going to be in one person's ballpark or wheelhouse. Others are, so I don't expect everybody to like everything. And sometimes for your system, and as I said before, things need subtle tweaking to get them working there. But the odd time I get somebody who will comment and say, oh man, this is just terrible. That sounds nothing like the tone that was in your video. And it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it always puzzles me because I go, well, in some ways I don't really know what to tell you for the simple reason that, that's what I use all the time. I've just completed a bunch of sessions using some of my Marketplace presets. In fact, any sessions I get, I always use my Marketplace presets because I like them so much. I get tons of feedback from engineers, producers, clients that say, oh, the tones were amazing. We didn't even touch it in the mix. It just worked. And then I hear back from many customers who just go, I can't believe how amazing these sounded right out of the box. So I go, that's great. And it always makes me really happy to hear that because if I can give somebody a product that works really well for them right out of the box, I'm super happy. And it's a win-win situation for everybody. But it always puzzles me the times where somebody comes back. And oftentimes, more often than not, it comes down to some sort of user error. I've had situations where somebody comes on and I ask them, well, do you have any global EQ on? Well, yeah, of course, I have the global EQ set to my favorite EQ curve. And I kind of scratch my head and go, well, you realize then you're not listening to my preset anymore. You've taken the preset that I carefully crafted and sculpted and created, and you're running it through a completely different filter. And it's going to sound potentially terrible now, depending on what that EQ curve is. Maybe that EQ curve works for some things, but a global EQ is designed to be, applied to every single thing we put through it. And I've created these so that it doesn't need it necessarily, unless you put it on and find that it works better, right? I have some folks say, Well, I switched out your stock cabs for an IR because IRs are better. And I go, well, okay. And again, that's perfectly fine, but don't expect it now to sound like it did when you heard me play it, because I didn't use that IR. Changing the IR out is no different than putting a global EQ with some EQ curve on it. I've had some people say to me, I'm playing it through the power cab. Do you ever check your sounds through the power cab? Yeah, that's exactly what I check it through, along with many other speaker systems and monitoring systems, from headphones, studio monitors. And they say, well, it just doesn't sound good. I'm like, how do you have your power cab set? Well, I run my Helix big volume knob on 1 and I crank the power cab up. Now, some folks might say, well, that shouldn't make too big a difference, but it actually does make a bit of a difference because we're not getting the optimal signal level into the power cab for the speaker to react the right way. Plus, we're raising the signal to noise ratio since we're not sending a nice healthy signal out of the Helix. When I do my presets, I have my Helix big volume knob cranked up and I'm feeding an optimal signal to go into a power cab or other sources. Now, sometimes there might be situations where you need to turn that down. Well, you just go out to the output block and bring it down to whatever you need. These are just some of the examples of some of the situations where some folks are using the gear in a less than optimal manner, or sometimes in a manner that's just going to change the outcome in a very dramatic fashion. So in that case, you can't really blame the gear for the end results. You can't really blame the preset for the end results. You have to blame the fact that, I'll go as far as to call it user error. If you're getting the end results you want, then it's not user error. But if you aren't and you're scratching your head puzzled at it, then there is probably something in the chain that isn't being done right. I've done videos where I've simply put an amp and cab block in the Helix and recorded it. No post-processing whatsoever, no compression in the chain, no EQ, no nothing. And I said, here you go. That's what it sounds like when you just pull up the stock settings. And a lot of folks watched those videos and went, wow, that sounds really good. I can't get that out of mine. And that always puzzles me, and I wonder why they can't get it. But a lot of times I've had other situations where people are like, I'm playing the preset with the stock cab, into the front end of my Mesa Boogie whatever amp through a 412 cab. And you go, well, okay, again, now you're playing a cab simulation into the front end of an amp, which isn't really the tone that's looking for necessarily, through another speaker cab. So you're adding more filters on top of it. So the problem is when somebody approaches you and says, well, what do I need to do to fix it? It's a very tough question because I need to know everything in your entire signal chain, right? Right from your guitar to the input and output settings of your Helix, maybe in the case of using the Helix, what you're monitoring with, how you have that hooked up, and any other number of things. So the interesting thing about it, I wanted to do a little blind test again here, but this is going to be a little different simply because I'm not actually going to tell you what you're listening to. I'm going to give you 5 sound samples, and to sort of lay out what's happening here, this is a little guitar DI track I used for a previous blind test, and I just thought I would reuse it. I had it recorded already. It's a little guitar riff. I recorded this with my IK Multimedia Axe.io, captured the dry, unprocessed, DI'd guitar, and then I reamped it through 5, we'll call them situations. I'm not going to tell you the gear I used. I'm not going to tell you what you're listening to, but I would like everybody to go down into the comments and tell me which of these 5 you prefer in order. Just sort of rank them. So tone A, B, C, D, and E, and tell me in order which ones you preferred. They're not designed to even be close in their sound qualities. This is not trying to match them. They're completely different tones. But I'm just curious to see who likes what and in what order. So if you guys could do me the favor, leave me the comment below which ones you like. So without further ado, let's take a listen to that. I'm going to play the tones one after another, and then I'm going to splice one together at the end where you hear it kind of switch back and forth between them in a more seamless fashion. All right, what'd you think? There was some obvious differences between the tones, as there was supposed to be, but what I want you to do is give me in the comments below the order of your preference of those tones, which ones you think are the best, which ones you liked, and maybe if you want to leave any comments about what you liked about them, that is great also. In the next video, I'm going to reveal what you actually heard in each particular situation. And I think it'll go a little ways to showing what a lot of folks conclude, whether it's the gear's fault for making a certain sound a certain way, is not always necessarily true. So this was a fun little video I wanted to do just to discuss some stuff that I see, because I get hundreds and hundreds of comments and I can't always answer them all. There's just not enough time in the day. But there's always some things that I walk away kind of scratching my head wondering, you know, why is that person getting the result? And this isn't to blame anybody. I mean, there are some people who are just new to it and they don't have the knowledge of how to tweak things a certain way. And that's why I've done so many dialing in and created great tone videos to really try to help folks to, you know, dive into the Helix and know how to tweak it in a way that's going to give them the results that they want, whether it be using a ribbon mic or putting a compressor at the end of the chain, or how a compressor works, what's the best way to use reverb, and even dispelling some myths that start getting spread around the internet that really aren't helpful to anybody in getting the end result, but yet somehow these things get spread and then folks have problems because they listen to that maybe poor advice at the time. So there's no blame in saying that it's user error, but sometimes it just is. And I'd rather the person realize that possibly in this case it's user error, and then come up with a solution towards working towards what that person is hoping to hear and get the results they want out of their equipment. So leave me your answers below. I think this one's going to be fun. In a few days, I'll do a results reveal video of what you were actually listening to. I really think this is going to be interesting simply because there's no pre-existing bias here. Nobody knows what they're listening to. Each of those sounds could be a number of different scenarios, probably far more than anybody could imagine, and it's probably not going to be what you think. So just go into it not trying to think you know what you're listening to. Just go in and tell me what you think are kind of the best sounds to the worst sounds, and your preferences of those particular 5 tones. And we'll have fun talking about that. And I'll show you how I recorded all the different tones in the reveal video. So thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Thanks for taking part in advance. I appreciate it. Please like the video, share it with anybody so we can get a bigger sample size of folks giving their preferences of what they like as far as the tones go. And subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out, and I'll be back really soon with some more content. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Ciao for now.